Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Andertons TV. Today I am joined by Dave Swift, who many of you, especially if you're UK based, will recognise as the ever-present stalwart bass player in the Jools Holland Band. And thank you very much for coming down today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And as is always the way in these things, I like to just, find out a little bit more about the guests and what inspired them to play the instrument they've chosen and the style that they've chosen sort of growing up, and talk about career, and we'll get to gear as well.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about, life in the Swift family household sort of growing up, and was it a musical place?
People have asked me that before, and I used to say not particularly, because I was associated musical family with everyone playing an instrument, everyone being either semi-pro or something like that. But it wasn't the case with mine. My parents, they loved music. There was always music being played in the house, on the radiogram, as it was back then, and on TV. And my dad had some albums. He loved operatic music for some reason. And Mom she had a great singing voice as well. She didn't only did it around the house, and later on when she used to go to church, but she did have a really nice singing voice. But I suppose the key thing for me, I've got two older brothers. They're 8 and 11 years older than me, and both of them were into music, and they both played acoustic guitar. Mm-hmm. My eldest brother also brought a piano into the house, which he was the only one that ever spent any time with it. My dad just thought it was a lovely piece of furniture. Yeah. That was the key thing of it. But for me, as the youngest brother, I mean, this was, although it didn't sort of make me think, I want to do this, I want to be a musician, but it was still pretty cool having instruments around the house and having siblings that played it, because all my other friends, nobody in their household played an instrument. Yeah. So I would fool around on their guitars, and I'd plonk around on the piano. But I suppose the thing for me was singing. I always, believe it or not, even though I don't do it now, I actually had quite a good voice when I was a kid. So I always used to get picked for the school choir. Later on, I joined the local church choir, which I stayed in for about 8 years. So yeah, actually singing for me was that came first before I even contemplated an instrument. And
were you always drawn to sort of rhythm section and bass players when you were listening to sort of pop music, or was there was it, because I don't really know, I can only talk from my own experience, but I played a bit of bass before I played the guitar, because I just thought A, 4 strings would be easier than 6, and B, I'd probably have more chance of getting in a band. Okay. Until I realised, like after a year of playing bass, that actually it's much more difficult than playing the guitar. And anyway, but sure. Did you have a particular player that inspired you, or how did you end up? Well,
I didn't start off being a bass player anyway. That bass isn't my first instrument, sort of, believe it or not. So yeah, I tried to. I was playing my brother's guitar, but I just found it really difficult. The 6 strings. Ironically, now I've got a 6-string bass. That's true. Who would have thought it? But and all the playing chords and that, and I just thought, this doesn't feel very comfortable. It doesn't feel natural. And neither did the piano either. Yeah. So it wasn't until I went to secondary school, and we had one of those teacher-parent music evenings, and you can go and you can watch all other students play things, and all the sixth formers. Everyone was playing kind of flutes and clarinets and oboes. I'm thinking, not sure about this, I want to play something, but it's not any of those things, So anyway, I just thought, I love the idea of a saxophone, because I'd been watching Top of the Pops, and a lot of those bands on there had horn sections, which usually had a trumpet player and sax player, And I really loved those, those two-tone bands at the time, like Selector, sort of Madness, the Specials, and often they had horn players there. So anyway, so I said, saxophone, that's it. I was quickly told that they didn't have one, so that was the sax gone. And then I saw a trombone, and I just thought, wow, what is that? Like, so unusual. It didn't have sort of keys or buttons on it, And I always liked stuff that was a bit kind of quirky. Well, I'm a big sort of horror sci-fi fan. So from a very young age, so anything that's a bit weird and odd, always appealed to me. So I thought, okay, trombone it is. Went to the teacher the following week, and he said, we've given it to somebody else, but here's a euphonium, and I thought to myself, well, saxophone, trombone, euphonium. I thought, hang on, this isn't what
I'm not even sure I know what a euphonium is.
It's a tiny tuba.
Okay.
So you play it like this kind of thing. And I just thought, well, I want to play something, and this is all they've got left.
You don't see many of those in two-tone bands, do
No,
you?
exactly.
You have to oompa band.
Yeah, well, this is it. Unless you're in a brass band, you're not going to be able to get much use out of it. Anyway, so I played it for a few months and realised this wasn't for me. And then that was it. I just threw the towel in.
Okay.
I just gave up on the whole idea of playing an instrument, and which was a great shame, because what happened then is that when I got the opportunity to choose subjects that you get to study later on, I didn't pick music.
Right.
I didn't even study music academically, because I thought, well, what's the point?
What's the point? Yeah.
How is that going to get me a job?
Yeah.
And all the things that I loved, which was art and sort of drama and things like that. I just all the arts I just didn't bother with. I just so ironically, I never even studied for music. But what happened is, I got to about 14, I just thought, you know what, I really still want to play something. Years have gone by. So there was and I still fancied the trombone. For some reason, it kept coming back to that. The trombone teacher came along on a Thursday afternoon when I had double physics, which I hated with a vengeance. And I thought to myself, okay, we can combine the two things here. I can have another go at playing the instrument that I wanted to play originally, and get out of physics as well. So I went along to him to have a meeting, and I said, I'd like to learn to play a trombone, please. He said, I'd love to take you on, but he said, you're too old. Oh. At 14, I thought, hang on a minute, isn't it? So, but anyway, he let me have one. He said, take it away for a couple of weeks, come back and we'll see what happens. And I knew that if I was going to have to carry off this charade of missing physics, I'm going to need to put some effort in here. And basically what happened is, I took it home and I fell in love with it. I just absolutely could not put it down. I was practicing it all the time. And I came back after 2 weeks and he went, oh, okay, I better take you on then. And that was it. I became his student. He was a very good trombone teacher. And then what happened is, I learned to read music. So I was then making up for not studying music academically in the classroom, but I was learning everything on this particular instrument. So then all of a sudden the school band needed a bass player. So I was feeling very cocky at this point. So I just thought, well, I'd played my brother's guitar a little bit. I'd had some experience with that. So why not volunteer for it? My eldest brother took me out. We bought a bass, which was a precision copy. I think it was a K precision copy. So this is in my hometown of Wolverhampton. It weighed a ton. I mean, the heaviest thing I've ever picked up in my life. But it was a start. I needed an instrument start. So then started to play bass in the school band. But the good thing was that I could already read very, very well from my trombone training. This was like a year after I took up the trombone.
Are you consciously listening to bass players at the time? And did you have a favourite?
No, not at all. I mean, because the thing is, I love music, but I was always listening to melodies, so for me, all of the records I was listening to, it was about the melody. It wasn't about the players. But obviously, as soon as I started to play bass, I knew I'd have to hone in on that. So, and then my trombone teacher said he saw the progress I was making, and his job was also as a fixer in the West Midlands, like booking musicians for various sessions and that. And he said to me, listen, I can get you work as a professional bass player. And I couldn't believe this. I just thought, how on earth am I going to get paid to do something that is just a bit of fun?
How old are you at this point?
So I was like 15.
So it's all happened pretty quick then, hasn't it?
Yeah. It was, so yeah. And he said to me, well, you should take up double bass as well, because if you play both, not many people do, and not many people play it well. He said, if you take up double bass as well as bass guitar, you'll get a lot more work. And so that's what happened. I left school. I had like one job in a music shop, funnily enough, in Wolverhampton for about 6 months. But I was doing gigs, and then at 17, there was enough work. I turned professional. So I was playing.
That's brilliant.
So I was a professional trombonist, double bass player, and bass guitarist.
Did you get just as an interesting point, given how many cuts there are to music services at the moment? I mean, I love the fact that the school gave you or lent you the trombone. Did they do the same with the double bass? Because I mean, those.
Oh no! I had to get my own.
Because they're extraordinarily expensive, aren't they?
Yeah. They definitely wasn't a double bass. Well, there was one in an old storage room, but it was like in 1,000 pieces.
Oh, fine.
I didn't have to. They just gave me that and a tube of glue.
Fair enough. Yeah, but because that's often the biggest obstacle, isn't it, to learning to play, particularly.
Yeah.
Not so much with guitars and keyboards and stuff, where the entry points for buying them are low, but yeah, for brass instruments and stuff, terribly expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what the thing is now, but don't you have to hire them or something like that? Do kids have to?
I think it depends on the local music service, doesn't it, and how well funded it is.
Yeah, but they had instruments there and we were given to them. But yeah, I think I was given the school trombone to use, but with bass I had to buy my own bass guitar and double bass. But that was it really, and yeah, at 17 I turned professional, and
still I've not heard you mention like a player yet that's gone.
Oh, okay.
That was the guy I wanted to be.
I can remember that the very instance that happened. So I was listening to stuff on Top of the Pops. That was my main source of music, and then I was playing trombone in a section at a local music school. You know, you go there in the evenings, and there's like a wind band, a brass band, a jazz band. You're playing all these different things, and a friend of mine, another trombone player who's still a good friend of mine today, he said. He said, "You've just started to play bass." I said, "Yeah." He said, "There's someone you need to listen to. You've got to." And he brought in a Weather Report album.
Okay.
And I didn't know who Weather Report was. And the album was Night Passage.
Right.
And he sort of said, if you're going to play the bass, you should listen to this. And up until that point, all the bass lines I'd heard was again just like pop. Type things, very kind of simple things that I knew.
Not
that
even
I could
funk disco kind of stuff.
To be honest, I love my favourite bands were things like Earth, Wind and Fire and Kool and the Gang.
Yeah. So killer bass lines.
Yeah,
all about the bass line, really.
Yeah, very much so. But then when I took this Weather Report album home and put it on, and of course Jaco Pastorius is the bass player on there, and I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. I just thought, you've got to be kidding me. Am I expected to play like this from now on?
Was that because I must admit my dad was a big Weather Report fan, and so I do remember growing up, you know, hearing a little bit of that stuff, and Weather Report and Chick Corea and I don't know, Yellow Jacket, Stanley Clarke, you know, so lots of but I don't really recall, again, not being a bass player, I don't really recall, was everything Jaco was doing on a fretless on that album, or was it a mix?
I can't, to be honest, I haven't heard it for a long time, and it's still one of my favourite albums, so I should know this, but I think a lot of it was, I mean, when you listen to his solo albums, there's definitely a mixture on there, like Portrait of Tracy on his solo album is definitely on a fretted bass, but I think that a Night Passage, there was a lot of fretless on there, but I remember hearing it thinking, that's the way you play the bass, that's how it should be, that's what I want to do. You know,
I think the world would agree with you on that.
Yeah, there was something very special, and then of course, so then I realised, discovered this fusion stuff, so that's when I started to buy like Stanley Clarke stuff as well, Return to Forever, but at the time it really was just those two, it was Jaco and Stanley. I remember putting School Days on and just going, but then it wasn't even just, not just the band was insane on all those albums. So it didn't really matter what instrument you were into, there'd be some lunatically good player. And when you think how old those albums are now, you know, those things are like sort of set like in the 70s, you know, so you'd expect the players that you're hearing today to be as accomplished as they are, but to hear what they were doing in the 70s, are you kidding me? So that was it really. So as soon as I heard that album, so Jaco was my hero. Your hero. Yeah.
That's amazing. So from right now, then you're effectively just depping, are you, and just doing sessions and
just doing gigs and session work. And I used to do stuff at Pebble Mill because originally I said I'm from Wolverhampton, so a lot of my work was in Birmingham at the time. But like theatre work.
So no band then as such. There was never an originals band or anything.
The only time I did, I was playing trombone in an originals band. There was like a funk band in Birmingham called the SRO band, I think, which stood for Standing Room Only, and it was. And it was very much like trying to be Earth, Wind and Fire, Kool and the Gang type thing. And I was in their horn section, so it was trombone, sax and trumpet. And it was some original stuff, but some covers. Definitely some Earth, Wind and Fire things in there. And we did some trips abroad, but that's actually the only time I probably was in a band. Other than that, I was hired as a session player, So I didn't really do much of that back of the transit van up and down the motorway thing.
Do you, I know obviously the Jools Holland thing is a band, but have you ever, is there a little part of you that ever thought, I had all these ideas and I would have loved to have been in a more like a creative 4-piece or something and do the thing, or have you just sort of gone, I don't know where the time's gone, but I've been employed as a bass player for the whole time and it just hasn't happened? Or
well, to be honest, bearing in mind that I didn't want to be a musician in the first place, I didn't expect it was going to happen. I didn't realise how successful I was going to be, so everything I did was a bonus for me. Everything that came along, I'm just thinking, this is the best job in the world. So, and I used to work on the cruise ships quite a lot as well. So that was a great thing for me when in my late teens, just getting to travel the world and it just expands your mind so much. Admittedly, the music I was playing wasn't as challenging as I'd like, but that at the time that wasn't the point. It was about life experiences and just seeing the world kind of thing. But what happened is it did get to a stage where I became dissatisfied with what I was doing. And you're absolutely right. I wanted to play more creative, improvised music with better creative musicians. So that's when I was going to go and study in the States. I thought to myself, because I'd never had a real formal education other than on the trombone. I'd not studied music. I'd not studied like harmony as such. Even though I was a good reader and I could improvise, I just wasn't quite sure what I was doing. I was doing it by ear, but I didn't fully understand all the other stuff. So I really wanted to go to someone like Berkeley to study, and I sent away for all the literature, and it was just so expensive. I just thought that's not going to happen at that time. So I thought the next best thing is to move to London, and at least then I can get down there and I can maybe do some private study with people, but just to be in that environment, which is more where I wanted to. And I wanted to go down and play jazz, improvised music. So I took the plunge and moved to London in 1988. And I knew 2 people, maybe max, maybe 1 person. And I just turned up and just started to go to gigs and go to jam sessions, whatever, and just try and establish myself. But I said to myself that I'm not going to play, I didn't want to play bass guitar that much. I wanted to play all double bass, and I wanted to play jazz. I wanted to play improvised music, and that's really what I did for the first couple of years, just playing in trios, quartets, quintets, and stuff where I wanted to do everything that I hadn't done before. So I could have come to London and straight away got a job in a West End show because of my reading skills, but I just thought, I've done pit work, I've done theatre work. If I do that, I know that I'll end up just doing that. I'll get that reputation, and I just thought, this is about a new start. So that's really what happened. I just started to do, jazz gigs, improvised gigs.
Is that something that, as you get older, you just become more accepting of the work that's out there? But I'm coming to the point of this constant sort of musician's sort of dilemma between what work can I do that pays the bills versus what work can I do that satisfies my creative and obviously some musicians are lucky and it's the same thing, but I'm guessing if you make a living out of playing in a pit orchestra, it's not the same thing,
that's true. So that's why I wanted to do. I'd never really suffered for my art. I think everybody else has suffered, but no, I wanted to. I knew that if I wanted to come down and be a jazz musician, that it was going to be a different thing. I was going to have to make. I wasn't going to be earning as much money, and that's exactly what happened. I really, was it was a very different life for me. But I was fulfilled musically a lot more. It was enriching my soul more than my bank balance. But I was happy with that. I genuinely was very happy. But then, interestingly, what happened is there was a saxophone player that I was doing jazz gigs with. My good friend Phil Veacock, and he'd already got the Jules gig. Right. Because Jules had left Squeeze. Well, he'd left Squeeze, the pop group he was in, several times, but this was the final time. He decided, that's it. Don't try and stop me. I'm leaving. And he decided to sort of have a solo career. Well, I say solo career. He wanted his own band. Yeah. So there was him and Gilson, who was the drummer with Squeeze, and they did gigs on their own, ironically called the Jools Holland Big Band. Right. But they did loads of duo gigs, and then ironically, the bass player that Jules used to use was Pino Palladino. The fabulous, sort of world class player, and it was, I believe, it was Pino's first ever gig when he moved to London. So he came from Wales, moved to London. I believe that working with Jules was his first ever gig, because Jules had a band called. I think it was Jools Holland and his Millionaires, right? The Millionaires, and Pino was in that. So Phil called me up and said, "Well, look, Pino's been doing some of them, and Keith Wilkinson, who was the last bass player in Squeeze at that time, he'd been doing a few of Jules's smaller gigs, but now Squeeze had reformed." Right. So the Keith had gone back with them. Pino was obviously, I think, probably with Paul Young or Gary Newman or something like that. So Jules was looking for a bass player, but he particularly wanted someone who played both instruments. But predominantly he wanted a guy who played double bass. So in other words, it was great for me playing both instruments, but if I'd have just been a bass guitarist, it may not have worked out. But Jules was very interested when he heard that I played acoustic bass.
Were the early versions of the Jools Holland Band maybe not going right back to when it was just him and Gilson, but was it always going to be a big band kind of thing?
That's what he wanted.
He did want that.
Yeah.
Right
so when I went along to, and they would already. The thing is, I joined Jules in '91, so he didn't have his TV show then. Later with Jools Holland didn't start until 1992.
Right.
The Hootenanny, our New Year's Eve show, didn't start till '93. So really, my main memory of Jules was playing with Squeeze, because I was a Squeeze fan. I used to buy all their singles, but was also when he was on the Tube with Paulie Yates.
Yeah, of course.
Because that was a program I used to watch.
Great, wasn't it? Yeah, that was proper anarchic TV. Wasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was pretty chaotic, And but that's where when I started to play bass, actually watching the bands on the Tube and on Top of the Pops. That's really how I learned to play, because I didn't have any lessons on bass at all. I'm a self-taught bassist, so I used to watch people on there and just where they're putting their fingers and the sound they're getting and what instruments are they using, whatever. So that was a big thing. So that was my main thing about Jules. That's where I knew him from. So but yeah, basically I had to audition for the gig, and do you know what? I'm the only person that's auditioned for that gig. I'm the only person that had to do an audition.
Right. Everyone else was just an invite, were they?
Yeah, when he wanted some horn players, he went down to a local pub in Deptford, because most of us, Jules is Greenwich born and bred, and most of us were living in that area. So he went down to a pub to see a rehearsal big band, and he cherry-picked a couple of horn players, like a couple of sax player, trumpet and trombone player. So at the time, the Jules band was a 9-piece. It was a 5-piece rhythm section, which included his brother Christopher on organ, who's a fantastic player himself, and the horn section. So it was a much smaller band. But I think deep down, Jules always wanted the band that he's got now, because he was just starting out and establishing himself as a solo artist. He wasn't going to happen straight away. He needed to build up a following to be able to afford the extortionate rates.
Well, I was going to say, it can't be. So, what is the band now? 12-piece, 15-piece?
I think there's like 20 or something.
As much as that?
Yeah, because it's so it's still a 5-piece rhythm section. I think there's 5 saxophones, 3 trombones, 3 trumpets.
Wow.
There's a couple of backing singers, and there's like Ruby Turner, who's our main vocalist. So, however many that is, but it must be around about 20.
And is that just? Is there a core of the band that's employed 12 months of the year, or is it just the whole band's employed 12 months of the year?
It's a set band, really. Jules doesn't like people depping the gig out. He wants everyone to be there at the same time. I always say with the Jules, so especially if you're in the rhythm section, you've got to be dead or dying to actually miss a gig. There's no excuses. Jules, but I'm getting married. No, we've got to. No, it's not that bad, but. But Jules, he doesn't want it to be a band where you just dip in and out. Yeah. He wants it to be a regular thing, which is fine. I totally get that. But actually, the rhythm section, that's a non-deppable thing for us. We really have to be there unless it's an emergency.
That's cool. So there's been very little turnover in the people in the band.
That's true. Yeah. I've been with him 28 years. But obviously Gilson, our drummer's been with Jules since they were kids. Because think about it. Squeeze Mark, our guitarist, has probably been with Jules over 30 years. Some of the horn players have been in longer than I have. So I'm not. There's people who've been in there for 10 or 15 years. But even that. It's still a long old time, but I did the audition for him at his studio in Greenwich, and it was just me, him, and the guitarist. I was playing acoustic bass. We played for an hour. We were just jamming. There was nothing set, and it was great fun. But I remember being very relaxed about it, and I think the reason why was because he wasn't who he is now. So, for instance, if you audition for the gig now. And how important it would be to get, because you're then going to be playing on the TV show, the radio show, you're going to be playing with all these people. You'd probably be, freaking out a little bit. But back then, none of that existed. Yeah. So I think for that reason, that's probably was good for me, because I was a lot more relaxed. There seemed to be less to lose if you didn't get it. So I just played, had some fun. Jules said to me, look, it's great, we love you playing, but there are some of the people that we have to see. And I remember thinking, well, that sounds like I've got the elbow already. But him and the guitarist went outside for a quick chat, and they came back in 5 minutes later and said, no, the gig's yours. We're starting in a month's time.
That's amazing.
But I'm still the only person that auditioned. But I think the reason for that is that the bass for Jules is so important. Maybe because of having Pino those early years, and he realised the value of having a very good bass player. But also because of him being the pianist that he is, he does a lot of stuff with his left hand, and he wanted to make sure that the person could either sort of keep up with what he was doing, or sometimes I have to copy exactly what his left hand is doing. But for him, what he listens to is the bass above all else. And I think he just couldn't take the risk of inviting someone to a gig and then finding out that I wasn't very good. He needed to hear my full credentials first. So that was that. That was 28 years ago.
Stylistically, I think all bass players will probably be interested to know. When you're in even in a 4-piece, there's the need. I think it's important. There's a conscious effort to create space for each musician to do their thing. When you're in a 20-piece, particularly when you've got a piano player that's almost he's the guy, and he plays, tons of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah.
What do you have to do then stylistically? Is it very much about just like a less is more approach, or just a?
Yeah, well, he definitely doesn't like too flamboyant bass playing, that's for sure, and it's it makes total sense, as you said, because you've got all those other players there. You've got some fantastic soloists in the band, all those horn players, they're all great players. So the majority of solos are taken either by Jules or them. Basically I think everyone gets a solo apart from me. I used to have a big feature on double bass where I would go out the front and do a big, and it was all, I could do whatever I wanted to, it didn't have to, just whatever I fancied. But I think, I think as time went on, it just became, that wasn't the sort of.
the bass solo is a thing of the past, isn't it? Really, it doesn't get its little moment in the sun.
Yeah, and also because there's so many other people in the band now, and we also have a special guest every time we tour on each gig. We don't just have our regular singers; we have a special guest come in. So, one year we did a tour with like Mel C. The next time, you'll do it with Alison Moyet, with Lulu, whatever, and you've got to give them 4 songs. So and I didn't mind it really. I just thought to myself, I just enjoy doing what I do and making everybody else sound good.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. And also, but Jules, he definitely he doesn't really want a flamboyant bass player, because that's not the gig for it. As you said, there's too much going on with his own left hand. And a lot of people have said to me, Dave, why don't you play, more flamboyant than that? Why don't you do more stuff? And I said, well, because I don't want to get fired.
Yeah.
They don't realise. At one time earlier on, and I still wanted to do cheeky little fills and stuff like that, and every time I did it, he would look over to me as if to say, "Really?
Yeah, yellow card."
Yeah. And one time he came up to me once and he said, it's great. I love what you're doing, but it's starting to go a little bit weather report there, And I thought to myself, bloody,
sort of backhanded compliment, sort of.
Well, yeah, exactly. Part of me was really chuffed.
Yeah.
That he even thought that, but obviously he was saying that it wasn't suitable for.
You don't fancy ever doing like a sort of a Dave Swift sort of Royal Blood kind of thing, where it's literally just you and a drummer and tons of pedals, and you can just be. Oh my god! You can be the sole focus of everything.
Well, people have said to me, "How come you've not formed your own band?" And I'm not. It just sounds a load of old stress to me, from whatever other people have told me, and just seeing what it's like for Jules trying to run that organisation. I'd much rather be a gun for hire.
Right.
Really, I'm really happy with that. It's just. I don't deal very well with stress.
Yeah.
And now I've become recently a dad to a beautiful 2-year-old boy, and that's a lot more responsibility as well. So even more than ever now, I enjoy, just being the session guy, the gun for hire. It suits me fine.
But so over your, you say it's 28 years.
Well, 28 years with Jules, but I've been a professional musician for 38 years.
But in the Jules thing, where it is literally, particularly on the TV show or whatever, multiple different guests.
Yeah.
Presumably, right, here's the songs, rehearse, limited time to get it rehearsed. What do you find most challenging about that kind of scenario, or is the band so well oiled now? It's just like everybody just gets the sheet music and it's brilliant on the first go.
Do you know what? We've been doing it for so long now. I guess we have gotten used to it. It's just something that it doesn't matter how hard or challenging something is at the beginning. If you do it long enough, it just becomes less so. But I have to say, when we first heard that Jules was getting the TV show in '92, it was quite a shock for us all, because we didn't see that coming. Those early gigs were things like sort of summer balls, university gigs, very, very small venues. And I thought, well, that's going to be it. And I thought that's absolutely fine. But all of a sudden you start getting calls saying, we need you to play with Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton and B.B. King. Is that okay? Are you free? And I never anticipated ever getting those kind of phone calls. That's something that I never envisioned being called to do.
Which has been the ones that, I mean, is it, I don't know, is it like, has there ever been a guest, like, I don't know, like a Nile Rodgers or something, you go, oh no, we got to learn like 4 Chic, it's 4 Chic songs, or what, has there been a guest where you just think, oh, like the Butterflies, and even though you've been doing it for as long as you have, where you're still thinking, oh, blimey, I better not mess this one up?
Well, there's always stuff that's going to be more challenging. I mean, some of the early stuff we did on Jules' TV show, funnily enough, a lot of the early ones were kind of country singers. There were people like Mary Chapin Carpenter and John Prine and guys like that, where the bass parts weren't that challenging. But and then, but doing stuff with Eric, obviously when you start to play with really iconic people, there is this, you do get, early on, you do get a little bit nervous, because you've just gone from being a session guy, actually not being seen by anyone, and not doing any TV work at all, and you're thrown in with this. You're on TV and you're playing with these living legends. So, but musically, it wasn't that challenge. My biggest challenge was wearing the right clothes for TV. And actually, I have got a YouTube channel. If you go back and look at those very early clips where I was in my 20s and I had hair, that's how long ago it was. I look terrible. I look as though I've just been doing the garden.
Like all in suits.
But people in suits, and I didn't even have a suit. And I've got jeans, I've got raggedy old T-shirts. I just looked awful. So that was the biggest challenge for me, was wardrobe malfunction. Everything else was fine, But no, it was. I mean, you had to learn like a lot of stuff, and sometimes the notice that you got for it was very, very short.
Yeah, what is that typically?
Well, let's put it this way: the radio show was the worst one for that. So the radio show has been going a long time. Most people don't even realise that Jules has one, but it's BBC Radio 2. It's currently on at the moment. In fact, I was on the other night playing trombone with Susie Quattro, because most of the guests on the radio show tend to be singers or guitarists. Yeah, it's very rare that a guest comes on and they're a bass player, but it does happen. So in recent times, a few years ago, we had Jack Bruce came on there, we had Mike Rutherford, we had Tony Visconti, and more recently Susie Quattro, and they all wanted to play bass. And on that radio show, it's an hour show, it's half an hour it's just really the rhythm section with a couple of horn players. It's a much reduced band. So it's us chatting away. The second half of the show, the guest comes in, and we do a live song with them. I mean, it's all pre-recorded. So as soon as they enter the room, we do the song first to get it out of the way. Yeah. We start the show, and then we insert it in the middle of it. But again, when you get a bass player, I'm redundant for that show. So because I still play the trombone, I just jump on with the horn section. Yeah. So my recent top of my CV is played trombone with Susie Quattro. Again, I never anticipated that happening either. It's very odd the way these things work out. But in the early days of the radio show, we knew who the guest was, but we didn't know what the song was until they turned up.
Oh, you're kidding!
So that was pretty sort of I say stressful. I mean, it kind of was, but it was. I like the word challenging more than stressful. So literally they would come in and they would bring a CD with them, and we'd put it in the control room, and we would have to sit around and listen to it a few times, and then we'd have to play it with them. And again, it depends on the track, it depends on the artist, and some of it wasn't too difficult, but every now and again you'd get something that was, you'd listen to it and you think just, oh my God.
Have you ever had where an artist was going, it doesn't go like that, Dave, it goes like this? Or is that I suppose that's just normal.
Well, the thing is that, I'm very conscientious when it comes to, because here's what I do, because I can read and write music very well. Yeah. If we get stuff in advance, I always transcribe everything. I meticulously write all the bass part down note for note. And if the guy on the record or the gal on the record has made a mistake, I will write that in as well, just in case someone has become so used to listening to that they want it what's on the record. So but in those early days of not getting what there was no time to do that. You literally had to do it on the spot. I remember we had Amy Winehouse came on. The first time we worked with her was on the TV show, and she did a jazz standard I think it was Teach Me Tonight. But then she came on the radio show, and she wanted to do, I think, Love Is a Losing Game. Now, we'd heard it on the radio, but none of us had ever scrutinised it. So she came in the studio that morning, and we had to put the CD in, and we had to learn it while she and I remember she was like doing her nails like this, watching us from the corner of her eye, thinking, how long is it going to take this lot? And I think we listened to it twice, and we recorded it. I think we had 2 run-throughs.
Is there somebody, if you could be the booker or not, and is there somebody that would just complete like a life goal for you to back?
What, that I haven't played with the
that you haven't played with the
Yeah, there is a couple because I've definitely played with a couple of my heroes, 100%.
Who were they?
Shaka Khan would have been one of them. George Benson.
Ah, super cool.
Smokey Robinson. And Al Jarreau, really. And I might even put Al Jarreau at the top of that list because he was someone that I had. I mean, all of those people, I had all their albums because that was the kind of music that I was, when I became a bass player, that's what I was listening to. So jazz funk, all that kind of stuff. So, and Al Jarreau, man, he was someone that I listened to probably more than all of those guys. And when I was on the cruise ships, I used to play his music all the time. That was the soundtrack to my time on the cruise ship. So yeah, he came on the radio show, but then we did the TV show with him, and that for me was just, it just blew my mind getting to work with him. So those are the ones I've already worked with. There's probably some more. Amy was great as well, of course. But ones I haven't played with, Stevie Wonder would be nice.
Okay.
Stevie Wonder, that'd be great. I'd love to play with Joni Mitchell, but obviously that's because I know she's had a lot of health issues, so that's probably highly unlikely. But that would have been another one. Because ironically, my 2 older brothers had Joni Mitchell albums when I was a kid, but it was early stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't get into her until she started to use those jazz musicians like Jacko and Pat Metheny and all those guys. But it then did make me sort of go back and listen to the early stuff. So yeah, someone like Katie Lang, I'm a big Katie Lang fan as well. She came on Jules' show, but she had her own band with her, so that would be good. But yeah, Stevie would be. We had Luther Vandross on there, but at the time, I can't remember why. I think it was just Jules was backing him because a lot of the time on the TV show, that we don't need the full band. The full band are always there for the New Year's Eve show. Yeah. But on the regular later thing, sometimes it just might be me and Jules or me, Jules and Gilson. So the last one I did, I think, was Lily Allen. And it was just Jules on piano and me on acoustic bass, a very intimate setting. So, but that's what's, it's great with that band, it's so flexible. But a lot of the time they just want like an acoustic version of a song. So
is this literally, it almost sounds to me like the best gig in the world. It's like, it's just, you've got these insane guests on tap. Who all want to do it. Everybody knows the Jools Holland show. I don't know if it goes out in lots of other countries.
I think it does. Yeah.
But everybody watches Hootenanny on New Year's.
Yeah.
It's like, what apart from maybe, I don't know, would you, if somehow you could jump in a time machine and you got the gig in Weather Report instead of Jacko, would that have been the only other thing that might have been?
Yeah, well, I always said, I mean, it's a lovely thought, but I think I'd have been a bit underqualified. But do you know what? When I was younger, in my teens, the 2 bands that I wanted to be in were Weather Report and Earth, Wind and Fire. Those would have been my ultimate bands, I think, as most bass players at that time would have done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they would have been the ones. But yeah, the Jules gig, it is a fantastic gig, and it's very, very unique as well. I can't think of any other gig like it where, you do the tours, you do all of those things, and you make records, but then to be the house band on the TV show and on the radio show, and on a regular basis, week after week, you're getting to play with anybody and everybody. We got to play with 3 of the Beatles and 2 of the Rolling Stones. I mean, how else would you get to do that? I can't imagine it. Even. I mean, people used to liken my position to, like, say, Will Lee in the Letterman band.
I was about to say some of the big American chat show things.
But then again, the difference is, say, the Letterman show was a chat show with a little bit of music, whereas Jules' show really is a music show with a little bit of chat. But I guess that's where people used to make the comparison. That's the closest thing you can say. But yeah, it's wonderful, the fact that we didn't see that coming. We didn't expect it. None of us. It just happened. It was just one of those things. But yeah, the learning of the songs, what happens now is we don't get put under that kind of pressure anymore.
Right.
With the radio shows, we get, say, the night before or 2 nights before, and we get sent the stuff, But again, we never really get written music because there's only me and the horn section that can read. You know, I mean, the rest of the rhythm section, like, I think Jules does read to some extent, but I don't think the rest of the guys do. But they're all great players and they all play by ear. But I just love to do transcriptions because I like the challenge of it, and it's actually a nice thing to have, you know. And also because I'm such a stickler for detail, I want to know. I don't just want to work out, that's kind of what's on there. That's close enough. Yeah. I don't want to do that. I want it to nail it. And one of the reasons is if you're playing with people, say like Shaka Khan, and she knows what the bass line to Aint Nobody is. She knows what the notes are. And if you just sort of have a close approximation of that, and she's going to come up to you and say, Dave, that's great, but it's not what's on the record, then what you're going to do, you
do not want Shaka Khan to come up to you and go, that's not what's on the record.
Because then you've got to stop everything. Well, not as though you could, but ideally you'd have to stop and go in the corner and and listen to it somewhere. So I want to be fully prepared. Yeah. So I always do that anyway. And if there's time, I'll learn the part off by heart. Sometimes there isn't enough time, and I'll use a chart. You know, but I've got thousands of transcriptions of everyone I've played with. I always, you know, I've got the name of it, who it was, and when it was, and it's nice because if you play with them again further down the line, I just grab the transcription out to remind myself of it. But we're learning the songs as we're touring. So we're touring, and we have to sort of, we get given the stuff. We're in our hotel rooms. You're learning it, then you're the next venue. So it's quite a lot of pressure at that time of year for that show. And of course you're playing like 15 songs with 15 artists that you've never played with before, when you're playing songs you've not played with, and you've got to cover every style and genre.
That leads me nicely on, because I'm getting a picture now for you know what it's like to be Dave Swift, and I'm sort of thinking, surely gear wise has got to be one of the biggest challenges, because it's no good you just going, well, I've got this old jazz bass that I love and that's what I use, because if that's not the right sound for the artist, or it's no good, is it? So you've obviously got to have. Do you have just an enormous collection of instruments, or have you just had to try and find one instrument that can do everything?
Well, I mean, I've only got about 100 basses at the moment, so it's quite a small selection. No, to be honest, I never thought I would be. I mean, I'm a collector of a lot of things. You know, I love sort of old horror sci-fi movies, so I've got like a lot of memorabilia from that. But I never anticipated collecting basses. So when I moved to London, I had my double bass. I think I had two bass guitars, and that was it. But I probably have got 100 basses now, something like that. But I bought them just because I just like them.
Yeah,
they're just fun.
I think guitars and basses generally, all the different colours, the different shapes, the different wear and tear that you get on them. I think unlike almost any other instrument, I think, have got a visual art.
Absolutely,
to them.
They're very aesthetically very pleasing, and the fact that they're still relatively sort of small in comparison to collecting cars and things like that. But yeah, I can't remember when it started. When I first got the Jules Go, I think I had a very modern bass. I think I had a very modern 6-string. And at the time, it probably really was highly unsuitable because of the stuff we were doing. This was before the TV show. So I ended up getting a couple of vintage Fender jazz basses, which I still have. So a lot of those early TV shows, that's what I'm playing. I'm playing like a mid and a late 70s Fender jazz. And I still have them, but as time went on, I became more of a precision guy. Because my first 3 basses I had when I was a kid were all P Bass copies. But I never had a real Fender until I was 30, I think.
Right.
But a P Bass was what I felt comfortable on. And let's face it, a P Bass ultimately was what Leo Fender invented to be a more portable version of a double bass. I mean, that's what it was. And Jules wanted that sound. He didn't want a very sort of hi-fi modern sound. He wanted it more traditional. So the P Bass was the obvious thing, and because he loved players like James Jamerson and Willie Dixon on double bass. So for me, to begin with, it was once I'd sort of stopped using the jazz bass, it's then all about the P Bass, flat wound strings, and getting a very warm, fat sound. That's what he wanted. But then when you start to do those TV shows, and then you realise that isn't always the right thing for it, And the first time we played with Shaka Khan we did a TV series called Don't Forget Your Toothbrush with Chris Evans in the mid-90s.
Yeah, was that?
It's just like a wacky game sort of variety.
That wasn't like Denise Van Outen as well, or was that a different thing he did with her? But I do remember Don't Forget Your Toothbrush. It was off the back of his Big Breakfast kind of thing. It was all a bit mad, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was just before he did, was it TGI, I think it was?
That's right, yeah.
So, and it was great. It was primetime Saturday night TV.
Yeah.
And we got called to be the house band on there. And some of the people that we got to back on there was, you know, they were cool as the people we got to play with on later. Yeah. So it was people like sort of Cher, Kylie, Roger Daltrey, Barry White, Shaka Khan, Belinda Carlisle. And yeah, so that was the first time I played with her, Shaka, and I just thought, and she wanted to do Aint Nobody and I'm Every Woman. Yeah. The two big ones. And again, I'd never played that stuff before, but again, my dilemma with that first thing was I'd got a 4-string bass. I didn't have a you know, the low B string in there. So I mean, with Aint Nobody, it's like kind of. So you got those low E flats. So at the time I couldn't do that. I thought to myself, well, maybe I should tune down.
What would that have been recorded on originally then? Because it presumably was just on just a detuned 4-string.
I think that, to be honest,
was it a synth
I think that was a synth thing. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was. So yeah, so it was low E flats and with the 4-string. So the dilemma was for me then, you know, do I tune it down? But then the trouble is everything else is moved. You then got to adjust. So the other alternative for me was playing everything up the octave and using an octave pedal. So
okay.
I think that's what I did on the TV show. I can't remember, but the only thing with playing stuff up the octave, because you need to do that with an octave pedal because of the tracking thing, but playing on the thicker strings just feels there's like more gravitas there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So even though using the octave pedal does work, you know, I sort of that kind of thing. So it just felt better playing it. But back then, like I said, I didn't have a low B string, so I played everything up the octave. And also that thing where, you know, Jules, he wanted the bass to have a more of a muted sound kind of thing. So, you know,
is that a throwback thing as well?
Yeah,
like
I think it's
muted.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So he wanted. So for instance, one of the bass lines I have to play with, it's a song we did called Bloodsucker Blues, and the bass line is. It's that kind of thing, but actually Jules has said, you know, this is what he wanted.
Right.
So and he can't, and I do like that. It just sounds, I don't know. It's just and I never really played like that before, even though I was aware of the technique. Because one of my favorite bass players is Anthony Jackson. You know, fantastic American session player, and he uses that technique a lot. But I think Jules wanted it because it sounded more like an acoustic bass to him, you know, more so than having the notes. And he just worked on a lot of the stuff that we do. Like we did a song with the Sugar Babes called "Please Can I Talk to You," and the bass line is. It sounds fine, but.
It's got like a dubs kind of sound, doesn't it? With that.
Yeah. And so I thought, you know what, he's right, that does sound. So really that changed my technique for years. I didn't play with my fingers, I didn't use a pick or anything. Everything, and also it works really well on those, like, you know, if you're doing like sort of walking bass lines, you know. That kind of thing. Yeah. It sounds a bit more authentic. But yeah, and stuff like.
I really like that tone.
I don't know, it just kind of almost sounds a bit classier or something, you know. But it's nice to have that colour thing, you know. So actually, and if you watch like Sting, I don't know if he still plays like that, but he did a lot of stuff with just his thumb, you know. So for me, that was my technique. Yeah. That was it after that, until a number of years ago when I had a terrible thumb injury and I snapped the ligaments in my thumb.
Ow.
Yeah, it really was. And I thought, well, I'm done for here, because that's if I could have damaged any other digit apart from that one, and I thought that's the key one, and I was going to have an operation on it, and a lot of people said we've had this and it didn't go very well, but we said just leave it and let Mother Nature take, and that's what happened. It kind of repaired itself. It's not as strong as it was, my grip isn't, but at least I was able to play again. But in the meantime, I then started to use a pick, which is what I did when I first started to play. All my early books that I had, they were like, because I was a big fan of Carol Kay. I love Carol's playing and stuff, and that was all, she was a pick player. Right. So I actually kind of came back full circle to sort of to playing with a pick, but now that thumb's healed, I can actually go back to using. I
assume that, you know, stylistically, all sorts of stuff's in your repertoire. But are you a comfy slap bass player as well, or are you sort of, is that like if you can avoid it?
Well, that's a good point to bring up. Okay, so here's the thing: when I started to play, that was at the height of all of that, the popularity of that. So I obviously bought all level 42 stuff and all the Stanley Clarke things, Marcus Miller. So yeah, I was definitely a slapaholic.
Right.
You know, I absolutely,
too much slap. Is that what we're saying?
I absolutely loved it, and the bass I had at the time was right for it as well, because I had a Music Man Cutlass bass, which were very, very rare. And I got that in the mid '80s, and of course it was a Stingray bass with a graphite neck. My goodness, that was a bright sounding instrument.
I bet.
He didn't need much treble on that, I can assure you. He didn't open the tone too much, but yeah, I had to do it all the time, because at the time that the stuff I was doing on the cruise ships, the session work, that's what everyone wanted.
Right.
And you know, and I, even if I say so myself, I was pretty good at it. You know, I was very competitive,
right,
with it. But then what happened is, when I moved to London, because I decided I didn't want to play bass guitar that much, if at all, to be honest. I wanted to play upright bass. I wanted to play jazz. I wanted to be playing, you know, Bill Evans trio stuff, but you know, not only did I neglect those chops, I neglected playing the electric bass completely. So, and then when I got the Jules gig, he wasn't a huge fan of that thing.
I can imagine.
So quite the opposite. Like I said, you know, he definitely wanted more of that, as opposed to, you know, he wanted this. So that kind of suited me, really. But then what I quickly realised is, there was no call for it. Everything that I was doing, all the artists who were working for, nobody asked me to do it. And in the 28 years, here's an interesting point. In 28 years I've been doing this gig, I've had to do it twice for two people.
And it was such a thing, wasn't it? Yeah. Like, you know, it's huge. We use Nathan King, Mark's brother, for our bass video. Great guitar player and bass player. Yeah. And so we went to see, he plays guitar in level 42, and so we dive off and see them when they're in Guildford and stuff like that. And it's just like, it's such a great, you know, it's such a great throwback to that time of just like, you know, all this killer sort of driving slap bass stuff. But you are right, it just kind of, I don't know, is it almost like Eddie Van Halen Whittle? It was sort of like it had its thing, and it's like it's still kind of cool, but it's just not people just don't do it.
Well, it's ironic, because I think it is as popular as ever, because there's still a lot of people doing it. But ironically, you know, I think the majority of people doing it are in their bedrooms. I mean, I could be wrong, no disrespect to them, but the thing is, you know, with a Jules gig, I mean, you could argue, because of the nature of the music we play, which is more R&B blues bass, so people are going to say, well, of course you're not going to get called to do that, but let's not forget, look at all the artists we play. So we're playing with pop artists. You know, we were playing with Amy Winehouse a lot. We were playing with Adele a lot, Ed Sheeran, Rag and Bone Man. So we're playing with current people. We're not just playing with old school blues players. You know, and the two people. I mean, really, it's just one song. It was like Barry White. It was on the Chris Evans Only a Toothbrush, and he had a new single out. And I listened to it, and I think there was a little bit of slap on there, and I thought, yeah, that's fine, I'll do it. And it is on YouTube out there. You can hear it somewhere. I think it's called "Show Yo Right" is the song.
Dear old
And you
Barry.
can actually, so if you want to hear me do any slap at all, it's on that track. But
did the thumb injury cause you a big slap problem, or was that more?
Well, no, because the thumb injury was very recent.
Right.
The thumb injury was literally like about 4 years ago.
Right.
So but it would have done. I mean, had that have been a big part of my playing, I would have been in trouble. And because of playing double bass, and I do have to use the bow when I'm playing double bass, but not as much as if I was an orchestral player. If I was an orchestral double bass player and I had that injury, that would have been really serious.
Right.
Because that would have been everything to do with the thumb playing with a bow. So it was a real worry, I have to say. I did panic. But yeah, ironically, so that's the reason why I just thought to myself, do you know what, there's so many people still doing the slap thing. There's tons of people doing it. I could keep it up, but I just realised if you're not getting called for it, I'd rather spend that time. Because again, I'm playing, I'm still playing the trombone, I'm playing electric bass, I'm playing acoustic bass, I have to keep up my bowing chops, and I even started to play a bit of guitar now as well. So there's only limited time to do what I need to do for my job. So I could probably get back into the slap thing, but I think to myself, well, why? Because I don't get called to do it. I think if somebody came on Jules' show and it was like an iconic slap bass part, I mean, if it was important to the artist, I mean, I'd probably work on it. But interestingly, we had Nile Rodgers came on our New Year's Eve show recently, and it just turned out that he did request that he used his own band.
Right.
He wanted sort of Jerry on bass, and that's fine because they work as a team. And I didn't mind, but the dilemma for me would have been, do I play those iconic parts? So it was like sort of Le Freak, and there's a few others, but would I have played them like Bernard Edwards? Or would I play them, who was mostly sort of playing it fingerstyle, or Jerry now, who does a lot of slap stuff? So that would have been an interesting dilemma for me. So I wouldn't, I'd have had to have made that choice. And I would have probably sort of contacted Niall and said,
what do you want?
What would you prefer? But I would have probably gone more down, the original recordings of it. But I mean, if I had to come out of retirement to do it, but I just think to myself, it's just a technique that's overused a lot as well. It's whenever I see like any video clip on Facebook coming up, if the still picture is a guy sitting there with his thumb poised like this, I tend to go by it.
I want to talk about the guitar you bought today. I see your face in Ibanez promo shots a lot. So I'm guessing you're a fan of their stuff and they're a fan of you. But how long does the Ibanez relationship go back, and why Ibanez over a P Bass or all the other loads of great brands of bass out there?
That's true, and I think I've got most of them under my bed. But well, that's a good point. So do you know what? My first ever 5-string bass was an Ibanez. So this would have been back in the mid '80s, my cruise ship days, and I'd been using, I think at the time, I'd have this Music Man Cutlass 4-string, but I really thought, the times were changing, and we were expected to play parts that had been played on synthesizers, like the Shaka Khan stuff, and I got for whatever reason I picked an Ibanez. I think it was just whatever was available at the time, but it was a Roadster 2, so it was when they'd sort of changed the shape for the early musician basses, like the ones that Sting used to play. They changed the body shape, but what happened is the one that I got was really a 4-string neck, and they popped a 5-string bridge on there and squeezed an extra string on it. But at the time I just thought, it doesn't matter, I've got to have a 5-string, and that was it. But then I quickly realised that the tight string spacing was going to be a problem, especially back then when I was having to do slap stuff. It was just too tight, so it didn't last long. So that was my only brief dalliance with Ibanez for decades. And it was odd because I don't know why they went under the radar for me. I'm not sure. But again, maybe it's because I was focusing more on upright. I don't know. But I didn't sort of even check out any Ibanez for a long time after that. And what happened is, because I then started to collect instruments, I've got a lot of eclectic stuff. So obviously I've got sort of Fenders, but I've got things like a lot of those Ovation Magnum basses, very unusual things. I've got those Roland bass synths. Do you remember those?
Yes.
That look like something.
There's like a handle.
They've got a stabilizing bar on them, So I've got all these kind of weird things. But what happened is that I did a photo shoot for a magazine with my bass collection. Tons of bass there, and can you believe it? This was about sort of 6 years ago, I think, and there was only one Ibanez in there. One. If I did that photo shoot now, it would be completely different. The majority of them would be Ibanez. It's completely changed. So, but what happened is, a friend of mine was selling a vintage Ibanez musician bass, one of the dark stain ones. And so it wasn't quite the model that Sting was using. It was the one that came a couple of years after. So we're talking like early 80s now. But it's fretless as well, which is one of the rarer ones. They're very, very rare. I'm sure my friend regrets selling it to me now. But also it's the price he sold it to me. It was very, very cheap. But I wasn't going to buy it to use it. I just thought, because also I don't play fretless much because I play upright bass. There isn't much use for it. But it was such a beautiful instrument. As we were saying earlier on, sometimes it's just the aesthetic that you just think, you know what, I just want that to hang on the wall. It was gorgeous. Dark brown stain, beautiful ebony fingerboard. You know, so that was that. So I took it home, I had it all cleaned up and set up, and I just thought, you know what, before I put it on the stand or put it in this case, I'm going to at least play it, see what it sounds like. And I played it, and I thought, this is one of the best basses I've ever played in my entire life, and it's definitely the best fretless bass I've ever played. So I just thought, man, I've got to check out these more Ibanez instruments. So I then went a bit crazy and started to collect every vintage Ibanez that came along, and that's the reason why I probably got about 45 of them, 45 to 50 vintage Ibanez basses. But so all the variations of the musician basses. Then there's the studio range, and they did a couple of 8 strings, and they did the called Roadsters and that stuff. So I just started to and they're all stunning instruments, and the workmanship on them is crazy. If they tried to reproduce those now, well, I don't think you could. I think because the quality of them was just at that time,
you presumably don't pay a lot. Because I can't imagine that like a 1980s Ibanez bass, no matter how rare it is,
I know,
fetches a premium price, does it?
Absolutely. That's the reason why people have said to me, you've got to get Ibanez to reissue those. I said, well, why? Because you can still buy them. They're available all over the place, and they're still pretty good. I mean, they've gone up a little bit since I started buying them. I've probably caused that to happen. You're
single-handedly driving the price of used Ibanez basses up.
Well, I kind of shot myself in the foot because, you know, every time because I try and get them in really immaculate condition, and they really are. They're almost spotless. But every time I did an interview with one, I think Jules and I appeared on the front cover of Bass Guitar magazine. I'm holding one of the polar white vintage ones on there. And the trouble is, I draw attention to them, so everybody else then goes looking to buy them, and I'm thinking, no, I was going to buy them. I was going to buy them all. No, I think I've probably got enough now. But yeah, they were incredible. I just thought to myself, do you know what? These are the best basses I've ever played. You know, I just loved them, and the quality, the wood, the workmanship. I mean, they used to call them like Japanese alembics. You know, people nicknamed them that because
were they? Again, I'm familiar with the one that Sting played.
Yeah.
And so I think in my mind, I'm seeing basses that are more traditionally shaped, like a Stingray kind of shape, maybe a slightly blockier version of a Stingray. But I mean, obviously the one that you're holding now, much bigger extended horns on them, maybe more alembic-y sort of vibe. Yeah,
well, they're definitely more boutique things. So what happened is that I think, Ibanez UK saw me using these and bringing attention to them, and no one's really done that. Like Sting, and I think Adam Clayton apparently used them a lot in the early days. So I think they were quite chuffed that all of a sudden I'm kind of reviving this by using them on TV. So I was invited along to Headstock Distribution to go. They said, would you like to try some of the new modern instruments? I said, well, to be honest, I'm really happy with what I've got, but all of them I've got 4-stringed instruments. So I'm back to where I was all those years ago. I need to have, I need other instruments to cover a lot of the styles. So I just said, look, I've got loads of 4-string basses, I've got some 5-string, but 6 strings, I've always had an interest in them. Again, because I love Anthony Jackson, who invented the modern day 6-string bass. He was the one, that came up with that idea. So, and I thought, and also with 6-string, it just means that you can do so much more on it. You can cover so much ground. So I went along, and this is one of the first ones I played. So this is part of their BTB range, which I believe stands for boutique bass. Oh, okay. And and I just love them, and I do like active basses. I tend to always use the preamp, but I just thought, the quality, that the build of it was as good as I remember, with the vintage ones. So I tried a few out, and I just thought, wow, this is. I couldn't believe that Ibanez had been off the radar for so long. I'm thinking, wow, and because I wasn't aware of these sort of higher end ones, because I hadn't really seen them.
I think for us as a just a shop selling the lower end SR basses, the smaller bodied, quite contemporary looking ones. We have entry level versions of those for sort of 150 to 200 pounds that every time you pick up you go, I cannot believe how good this is. And then that series is pretty popular up to the sort of 700-800 pound mark. And then you're right, there's this funny sort of there's this perception, I think, amongst bass players that like, well, once I go over £1,000, then I'll look at Music Man or whatever. Sure. But Ibanez makes some crazy good stuff up in that kind of price as well.
Absolutely, and also one of the reasons why I really embraced the brand so much is, I mean, I've had instruments made for me. I've had custom boutique things made. I've also bought ready-made boutique high-end stuff. And you know, the old saying that all that glitters is not gold is never a true word was said, because, you know, I've had some very disappointing experiences with so-called handmade boutique instruments, you know, that I haven't been happy with them at all.
Yeah.
They've just not worked out. So, and I thought to myself, you know, going for instruments that already exist, so this isn't a custom thing. I mean, I think this might be a discontinued model, but bearing in mind I've got loads of new Ibanez basses. This is just one of my favorites, but you know, they're still doing the BTB range. In fact, Ibanez very kindly are making me a custom bass. Nice. As we speak. They said to me originally, you know, we'd like to do a signature model. And I had mixed feelings about that, because as flattering as that is, I just think, you know, there's a lot of people who have them out there, and a lot of the reasons for saying yes to them is ego. More so than the belief in what they're involved with is going to be a good product, is going to, you know, and I didn't really want to do that. I just thought, for me, using these instruments that are readily available in, you know, like here, you know, in Andertons, you know, you guys sell these, so they're not prohibitive to anyone. You know, people can buy the basses that I'm using on TV with all of these.
So do you find yourself nowadays then on the Jules gig just going, I'm pretty much taking the same guitar in every week, and I've got a rig now that's very versatile, or are you still looking at the guest lineup and going, out of my 100 basses, I'll take those two or whatever, you know?
I think it depends on who it is. Somebody asked me this recently, how do you choose what instruments to play? And it is often based on the guest and the song itself. You know, if we were doing somebody, I mean, for instance, we did, you know, I'm a big James Jamerson fan, the great sort of Motown bass player. So when we did, Corinne Bailey Rae came on the TV show, and she wanted to do For Once in My Life, which is, the bass part on that is a real, you know, it's a stunning piece of work. It is like a solo. Right. Every bar is different, and because Jamerson did it so well, first of all, I wanted to transcribe it and play it exactly how he played it. I just didn't want to. I thought that was my homage to him, but he played it on a P bass with flat wound strings, and I just thought, you know what, that's what that's gonna sound best on, you know. So, but yeah, there's definitely stuff that I still dig out an old Fender P bass, but some of the times it's not very specific, and then I'll just think I can use whatever wherever I like, you know. And I still prefer using Ibanez, and you know, they play great, they sound great. I more often than not I will use those, but particularly on the TV show, if we're playing with a lot of people, and also there's not space for me to have a lot of instruments there. I have to have a room for my upright bass, and there really is only room for one bass guitar, you know. So that's the reason why I will then make the choice of what's the best one that can cover most of these, you know.
I was going to say, touring presumably is the same. Like, you've got even more songs to do.
That's right.
And potentially again, you know, please just take two basses, or
I just take one bass guitar and my upright, you know. So all the more reason why, you know, it's important for me now to have like a versatile rig. Yeah. You know, like this, the Bergantino, which I've recently switched to, and it just means that, you know, there's a lot, you know, if there's anything that's not on any of the basses. So if I am out somewhere with a P bass and I think to myself, you know, I need to change this somehow, then I can do it.
Because that was I mean, we'll talk about this, because I know you've sort of done you've gone from the simplicity of the Aguilar being what attracted you to them for the sort of 7-8 years that you used that, to almost the not necessarily the other end of the scale, but you know, something that has far more flexibility and programmability to have different sort of tones. So what was the, I suppose, give Aguilar their dues. It's a great company, make great sounding stuff. What was the, I suppose, what was it that drew you to them in the first place, and then at what point, you know, was there this sort of like, do you know what, this isn't ticking all the boxes anymore?
Well, it definitely was the fact that it, you know, the first amp that I had was very basic, and I mean that in the best possible way. And because we don't do sound checks with Jules, so our crew do a line check. So I guess if the less you've got on there, when you do get on stage to play the first song, it's easy to have a quick look around and to make a quick tweak. But at the same time, as time went on, and especially because I have to play upright a lot, and amplifying an upright is very very tricky.
I wouldn't even know. I mean, do you just use a bass amp to amplify an upright, or is it just the pickup DI'd straight to the sound man?
Well, here's the other thing. I always used to use an external like a buffered preamp, because I always was found that was beneficial to get the best sound out of a piezo pickup. But this amp, because it's so feature heavy, there's stuff in there that actually I can do away with literally 90% of my pedal board, because a lot of my pedal board was EQ stuff. It was things. I mean, this has got like one of my favorite things in there. It's got a high pass filter, which means so you can still have some nice bottom end on there, but the high pass filter gets rid of all of that sub bass frequency that is no good to man nor beast, that makes it sound very nebulous. So I used to have that on a separate piece of equipment, but this has got this built in now. I mean, it's got a compressor in there, which again I used to have to use separately, but it was more to do with the fine-tuning the EQ. So in other words, you've got bass, low mid, high mid and treble, but you can change all of the frequencies on that, and that was a key thing. They're not set frequencies. So it's all very well having the simplicity of bass, middle and treble, but then you're in certain rooms that are problematic, you're playing instruments that are problematic, and I couldn't do anything else with the gear that I had, so I had to use external pedals. But now this has got everything in there, and it's bizarre, because it's almost like sort of Jim had read my mind and thought, what would Dave like in all this stuff? And it's literally, it was nuts. I'm thinking there was nothing else in there that I could have suggested that isn't in there, So,
and this is obviously we've got almost two models. I'm not terribly familiar with this range, so we've obviously got a more analog, non-programmable, simplistic one on the top here, traditional EQ and.
That's right. Yeah. So this was the first one, which is the B amp. So this is the daddy.
Yeah.
And for me, again, I went the other way. I needed something with a lot more, control on it, so I could really hone in on certain frequencies and do a lot. So, but obviously, there's a bit more. Thought that needs to go into that. So the idea that Jim brought out the Forte was, it was a simplified version of it. People who wanted to get set up pretty quickly, and so I'm using the B amp like in the studio at the moment. That's my main, and as well with the cabs as well. Which so these are a neodymium speaker, so it's 2x10 and 1x12.
Very compact.
Yeah, but also modular as well, because if I'm just doing a smaller gig where I'm playing upright, I could just use the 1x12. So it's nice, you can add stuff to it, and of course the amp goes down to 2 ohms, which is very useful. But what's happening is, I mean, I could probably use this one, the Forte, on tour with Jules, because it's powerful enough. But Jim has got a high-powered version of this, which is rack mountable. So I'm waiting for that to come out. That's a brand new amp, so that will be the touring one. But yeah, I mean, I love it, and it's such the right fit for me now at this stage. So yeah, the USB.
I always get frightened by USB. I'm not sure USB and guitars and amplifiers have any sort of
never the twain shall meet.
Never the twain shall meet. But I understand in this modern day of the interweb and everything that
so basically
download updates to it.
It's firmware updatable. So he's already and bear in mind, I'm not very technically minded. I've got to be honest. So this is a leap of faith for me as well, but because I've Skyped with Jim and he's talked me through this, and it is actually really intuitive, and believe you me, if I can understand how this works, anybody can. I can assure you.
It's not I said it's very, very compact, but not insanely light. I didn't think the cabinets were sort of like some of the cabinets I've picked up recently. You get ready for a lift, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, hello.
But the one thing I've noticed is that they then sound like they feel.
I was going to say, is there a sort of an element of like, it's light enough without going sort of, to the point where it...
Sure. I think that's a very good point. I mean, I've had cabinets, the same thing. They've been so ultra light, but that's how I would describe the sound of them.
Right.
And the same with the amps. I mean, they're definitely pretty light amps, considering what's in there, but they've still got a nice bit of weight to them. So you think there's something...
Do you ever just think, wouldn't it be great if I could just have a road crew SVT 8x10 stand in front of it? Did you go to Winter NAMM this year? Did you go out to that?
No, I didn't.
Because Derek Smalls made an appearance in front of a special Ampeg thing that they'd made that was the size of a house virtually, and played.
How fantastic!
Big Bottom.
Big Bottom, yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, has your sort of bass playing life always been just small, functional?
No, well, it started off like that. Do you know what? I've still got a Polytone Mini Brute 3 combo from when I was 17 that went all around the world with me, and I still got it. It's all sort of beaten up and kicked and had beer spilt all over it, but it still works, and I still keep it for nostalgic reasons. But again, when I got the Jules gig, I'd never had to buy a big rig. I'd never ever been in that position. So the first rig I had, I think it was a Mesa Boogie rig, like tuba 15s, the big valve head like that.
Yes.
And thank goodness I wasn't having to move that around, you know. But I quickly realised as time went on, you know, I just didn't need that size of rig. And also the volume on stage with Jules as well got problematic. And Jules did start to say to me, listen, you know, we need less volume, because there's a lot of open mics there because of all the horns, and it's a real piano as well. So Gilson, our drummer, started to use in-ear monitors, which meant straight away he could get rid of, you know, the big monitor that drummers have. And then he got one of those Porter and Davis chairs, the thrones that vibrate. So the next thing is, and Jules kept saying to me, turn it down, the bass is too loud. And I had like a 4x12, I think, at one point, and it was just too much. It was too big. So I was turning it down to the point I couldn't hear it myself. He was 20 feet away, and he could hear it perfectly well. So I thought so I'm going to downsize. So I've got a 4x10 cab, but then I went in ears myself, and all of a sudden, because my ears were ringing all the time when I come up stage. So with these in ears, it was a revelation. I just thought, I can hear everything. I can hear stuff I'd never heard in the last 20 odd years, like BVs and that horn part. The thing is, I felt like I was in a different county to everybody else. I could hear myself, I just couldn't feel myself, because I wasn't even getting anything from my own rig. So Porter and Davis made a platform for me as well.
Oh wow.
So that's what I use on stage. So there still needs to be a rig there, because there's only a couple of us that use an ear, so there still needs to be a bass player. And I like having something there as well. But yeah, for me, the in-ears and the platform, which of course vibrates as you play, and it fools your body.
I've seen the stool. I've never seen just a platform.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of companies that make them, but I'm with a British company, Porter and Davis, and it changed everything. Amazing. It changed my whole life, and
that genuinely replaces the feel of the air moving.
Yeah, well, because the thing is, really, I would have wanted my rig to be a lot louder, so I'm getting that. In the back of me, but because of Jules's request, I have to have the rig very, very loud, and he can't do that. But so the platform takes place, so your whole body is fooled into thinking you're standing in front of your rig at full pelt, and you're not bothering anyone. In fact, I've done some gigs where there hasn't been room for backline, and the crew have said to me, do you mind just using your in-ears and the platform? And I said, well, you know, I mean, as long as nobody else is bothered about it, because then there is a whole lack of bass in there. But so that changed a lot of things, and now I come off stage and my ears are fine, they're not ringing like they are. So I always use an ear.
Someone needs to invent a jacket that does that.
Well, do you know what?
And then you can just have that sort of. Well, you're going to tell me someone has already.
No. There's a couple of companies. There was somebody that had something that sort of you wore like a backpack, but I think now there's something. It might be called backbeat, I think, and it goes on your guitar strap, and it's like this big. And it does the same thing. Now, I've not tried it. I don't know how effective it is. I know the platform is extremely effective because it just goes through your whole body. I'm not sure if something that small and isolated will have the same effect. But it is, well, you know, someone said to me, because sometimes my boots that I wear on stage, I've got these New Rock boots, you know, and not as though I need any sort of height increasing shoes, but they do have quite thick. And someone said, why don't you build it into them? You know, so then you can walk around,
and you could have it literally linked into your Walkman or your iPhone or whatever, and then just have that sensation everywhere you go, just like massive bass.
Absolutely, you know,
probably terrible damage to your feet or something. When it does.
But yeah, I mean, the in-ear thing changed everything for me. But you know, I still need to have a rig there. So I'll have a slightly different rig on tour with Jules. Like I said, it will be the high-powered version of the Forte, and it will be one of their cabs. I think I'm getting the HG, which stands for holographic, HG410. And what you get is it's more of a vertical stack, which I like the idea of. It's not a traditional square thing. It's a vertical stack, and you only see 3 speakers on the front. There's a rear-facing 10-inch on the back. And
interesting.
So the idea is you get like a sort of surround sound type thing.
And is that... Oh, maybe you don't know. Is that sort of reverse phased or something? So they all do that at the same time, or because they're doing?
I'll just get the manual.
Yeah,
and I'll just
That's it. I'm always. I'm always. There was some orange. What did they call them? isobaric or something like that, but where they mounted one speaker directly behind the other speaker, so they're both facing. So you had these very compact cabs,
right,
but moving for like essentially twice as much air. Really clever. Yeah, I'm always interested. I think it's cabinetry is one of those. I think so many people just go, well, I'll buy the head because that's where 99% of the sound comes from, and I'll just use this cab that I've got. And it's like, I always think it's very 50-50, if anything, weighted even more in favour of the cab, where the sound...
Well, the thing is, I mean, a lot of people, I mean, before Jim bought the amps out, I mean, it was all about the cabinets.
Right.
You know? And actually, Jim has designed cabinets for other companies more than you'd think. In fact, so he really is. I mean, this guy is a genius. He's a very, very clever man, but he's such a sweet guy. And him and his wife Holly, it's a very small company. It's a very family-run thing, and that's the reason why. Another thing I like about them is it's very. It is very sort of family orientated, and it's
not Italian, is it? Despite the name. Oh, it is Italian.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I thought it was American for some reason, but it's an Italian. Okay.
Yeah, when I go over, he keeps threatening to cook me his meatball recipe.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, they're very, very much Italian. So
what is it about Italians and bass amps?
I know, it's odd, isn't it?
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? And what's the other thing? Piano keyboards, isn't it? Is another big Italian.
I don't know why that is.
Historic.
It's a bizarre coincidence, but yeah. So for me now, the combination of using Ibanez and using these, I mean, I really am thrilled. And again, the custom instrument it'll still be a BTB, so it'll be this body shape. But I got to choose, sort of the woods. I got to choose some of the electronic sort of pickups and just tweaked little things. So it'll be more than just like oh no, I want that, but in a different color. I didn't want it to be that sort of flippant.
I think they're great. I mean, I always think one of the things when we do the NAMM show and you see all the Ibanez guitars and basses on the wall, they've got SR, which is fairly inoffensive in terms of a shape, BTB that gets a little bit more out there, but then they've got the full Roger Rabbit ones, haven't they? Crazy. I can't remember what series that is, but I mean, such fabulous, beautiful pieces of work.
Well, I could have bought, I mean, obviously, aside from all the vintage ones, the newer ones that are my working instruments, I mean, I could have bought 10 others here that I could have easily have used that are interchangeable. It's not like that this is the best of the bunch. It's just, it is one of my favourites, but I could have easily have bought in any other of the 9 others to use.
Is string choice a big deal for you in terms of either the brand of string or the gauge of strings?
Yeah, well, it's sort of, especially when you start to play extended range 6-string basses, because not all companies will make something to cater for that. But I think for the last 4 years, I've been using Dunlop strings, and I'm really happy with them. There's and I think specifically these, I prefer nickel strings as well over stainless steel. I mean, stainless steel ones are great, but I think I like the nickel because they're just a little bit warmer. They feel a bit smoother on the strings. But I think one of the things that really when I first started to use them, what I really liked was the lower tension of them. I'm not a fan of high tension strings. I don't like the way they feel. I don't like the way they play. So these had some flexibility. So that was probably the main reason for going for them. And again, if you've got 4, 5 and 6-string basses and 7-string basses, which I have a couple, it's great that Dunlop sort of cater for all of those. So yeah, I think I've been using them exclusively for 4 years now. So I'm really happy with them.
Cool.
But yeah, as far as people say to me, why like a 6-string in particular? Why do you feel the need for that? And I understand because a lot of what I do, I'm not like a fusion soloist. I'm not like a chordal guy. But the truth is, Anthony Jackson, who invented the 6-string bass, sort of said, as far as he's concerned, the bass guitar is more closely related to the guitar family than it is to the orchestral string family. So it's funny how people refuse to call this a guitar, but it is.
It is a guitar.
Yeah, if we had a double bass here and we had a guitar and you put this and you said, okay, out of these, which does this resemble more? Which would you say is close to that? So Anthony said, for him, he couldn't understand why the bass guitar shouldn't have had 6 strings from day one, because it's a lower pitch.
Well, you've got the bass 6, haven't you? The original Fender which is the sort of baritone.
Yeah, with very, very close sort of spacing. Yes. But he wanted Because he wanted the extended range. He wanted to be able to play low notes and the higher stuff, but he wanted the same string spacing from his Fender. And that's when all of a sudden, people, the wide neck thing happened. I mean, the first couple of companies were horrified when he went to them and said, I want a 6-string bass, but I want the same spacing on a Fender. So that was a real problem for him, and the first couple of instruments he had didn't work out because the luthier, they didn't take notice of that. But the way I look at it is, the B string is definitely extremely useful, especially when you're trying to do a lot of synth parts on there. Now the C string, for me, what I love about it is, if you remember the Fender Bass 5, the Roman numeral 5 that came out in the mid-60s, it was a 5-string bass with a high C. And the whole point of that instrument was, it was for reading session musicians, people like Joe Osborne and Carol Kay that were in studios and they were having to read charts all the time. So if they're sort of playing like low down, as opposed to jumping up, up here to get to those higher Fs and Gs, all of a sudden they're there in the middle of the fingerboard. So they can play in one area for longer periods of time. They haven't got to take their eyes off the music and risk losing their place. So when you think about all the guys now who play 5-string basses with a high C, Fender were ahead of the game. They were doing that in the 60s. But yeah, I mean, that was a flawed instrument. So that's the reason why I predominantly like playing 6-string basses, because if I'm reading on Jules's TV shows, which I have to do a lot, it just means I can stay in one position for longer and I can play across the board and keep my eyes on the charts and not, because it's easy to get lost when you're in that TV studio. There's a lot of distractions. You've got cameras coming at you from every direction, and you're very wary of how you're looking. You watch yourself back on TV later on and you're very conscious of that. So, but the main thing is that the music is the most important thing. So that's why I like having the high C string on there. It's not because I need to do solos or play chordally. It's being able to play in one position for longer. That's why.
That's really interesting. Again, I always fascinated me as a sort of like, even with guitars, why 7 strings, why 8 strings? It's like you've only got 4 fingers. But it's I'd never really, no one's ever really explained that kind of just the sort of the practicality of just being able to minimize the hand, the sort of, what's it called? What do you call it, Pete? Fingernomics. To sort of minimize the distance that fingers have to travel to get to the note that you want to get to.
I mean, people have criticised me saying, David, you really need like a 6-string. 5-string we understand because the low B, but that's my reasoning behind it. And also sometimes it's you're always going to get a different sound, from that E flat to that one to that one. And often you are going to want that thicker sound. I mean, it does change.
Thins out, doesn't it?
But sometimes that's what you want if you want to play something a little quieter. But it has helped a lot, and sometimes also it's nice to not be stuck. It's nice to be able to kind of move. If you're having to play something like, that kind of thing, it's nice. So you've got that low F there, but if you're playing like a riff like that and it's for a long time and you're at the furthest end of it, and also. And just that from where your arm is a lot more relaxed. If you're going to have to do that for a long time than just always being out there, So having multiple positions to play it in, is great too. So that's the reason why. And I like big necks as well. I like wider fingerboards. So for me, I know with the 6-string that I can pretty much do everything on that. The only time that I didn't do it was a couple of years ago. We did at the Royal Albert Hall. We did this Stax event, and it was all the remaining people that recorded on the Stax label. And
were you banned from having anything other than a P bass with flat wound strings?
Well, no. Well, this is the beauty of it. I mean, I no one ever says to me what I have to use. It's always down to me. But even I thought to myself, if I do that show, playing with Steve Cropper and Booker T and all those kind of guys, and I turn up with a modern day 6-string bass, I thought, even I'm going to get a lot of flack for that. People are definitely going to say, that's a really bad choice, mate. And that nothing to do with the brand, just to the nature of it. And really, but I then had the choice of should I use an old Fender, which is what would have been used on those. But actually, I love my vintage Ibanez so much, and if you roll off the tone on that and you put flats on there, they do a killer P bass. It probably sounds better to my. So that's what I did. I used one of my vintage ones, but yeah. So even I know there are times when, because that was a specific evening of that style of music, whereas the Jules' TV shows, there's so much different stuff, you know. So
have you fan fretted yet? You know,
yeah. In fact, I've got 2 fan fret Ibanez basses. I think the original one was the SRFF 806.
Yeah,
so they're both
great looking bass. Yeah.
But I've got the newer version of that, which is a different finish on it. So it's kind of the same. Then there are some upgrades on it, but it's the same sort of body shape.
Do you like the sort of longer scale length? Make that bottom be a bit tighter?
Yeah, I mean, and it does work. You know, the B string on that is gorgeous. You know, and by the time you get to the C, because it's nice because it does balance out the tension of the string. So by the time you get to the C string, it's still got some. It feels nice. It's nice and flexible, but it's got some heft to it as well. There's some weight in that string, and not all of them do that. You know, you get a lot of 6 strings, and when you play the C, everything drops out of it, kind of thing. But I love them. But it's one of those things. That, would I use one exclusively? I might, but I just kind of like playing a lot of different instruments.
Yeah,
but they're definitely the Ibanez fan fret ones are definitely in my arsenal, you know. And I have got a couple of 7 strings as well, Ibanez basses, with a high F.
So it's not like the old alembic thing where you start getting the octaves on any like an 8 string, but it's just an extra.
Yeah, it's a higher. I mean I've got some 8 string Ibanez, but the vintage ones where you know they double up on the octaves. But the 7 strings I've got, BTB7 has got the high F on it as well. Now that's probably something that won't get a lot of use.
How big is that? I mean, is that just very?
The neck is only marginally wider. What they've done is the more strings are added, the closer it gets in, which then can be problematic because if you've got larger hands and larger fingers. If that gets too close, what will happen is like with that very first Ibanez I had, the 5 string, it gets so close that, funnily enough, I actually got one of those, my original one, because I sold my original one, the 5 string Roadster, but I got one more recently. I think it was on eBay, and I'm going to buy it for old time's sake, and sure enough, the string spacing is still hasn't changed, but because I play with the pick a lot more, it's actually now a usable instrument, but it sounds killer.
Okay.
It sounds way better than I remember it sounding in the 80s. So it's nice that I bought something just as a collectible, nostalgic piece, but it is usable. But yeah, I do tend to prefer, decent sort of spacing in there. But this is pretty tight actually compared to a lot of my other instruments. But it's still comfortable enough. It's not.
It's great. We must. I know you've sort of mentioned a recent move over to an amp that maybe requires less pedals.
Yeah.
And you sort of mentioned before that prior to having the biamp, you would typically have EQ pedals and compressor pedals and stuff on the floor. But what have you bought today just for?
Yeah, well, I mean, the main pedals that I use, they're all MXR, and I tend to use these more if we're doing the TV show with Jules, more so that on the regular gigs. It depends on who the artist is we're playing. So, if we're playing with more of a folk sort of person.
Yeah.
Or more of a blues player, then there's less opportunity for me to use pedals. But when we're playing with a lot more pop people, who the songs that we have to play were played on synths or computers, this is when they come into their own. So the 3 main ones I've got here, which I probably use more often than not. So there's MXR Phase 95, the MXR Bass Octave Deluxe, and the MXR Bass Chorus Deluxe. So these are probably the main 3.
I love an octave on a bass. I always think it just adds a subtle kind of, just adds that extra growl underneath,
Sure. I mean, we're, hang on, but let's just, okay, let's have a look. Yeah, so this is, I think the last time I used this one, it was probably...
Sounds great already, I love it.
It was probably on Jules's Hoot Nanny. And I think we played for, it was Junior Giscombe.
Right.
And it was that he had a hit with "Mama Used to Say." I don't know if you remember that track.
Yeah, I couldn't. Junior Giscombe didn't, but Mama Used to Say. I'm trying to. My brain is going. Like when a song is just on the tip, but you can't.
Yeah.
But
I think it was. I think it was in the 80s, wasn't it? It was a big hit, But the bass part was. But again, it's one of those things where you have the choice of playing it at pitch, which is kind of. And so it was something like this. But obviously, if you're just doing it without any effect on that, and it was definitely like a synth that was being used. So I just thought to myself, well, you know, I'd rather than sort of use an octave pedal and play up the octave just to try and get closer to the record zone.
I love the fact. I know you said it gets slightly the tracking becomes slower, but that's the sound. I think when you just hear the
but
big
you know, but it's important. Yeah, you need to then sort of play sort of everything up really. So that's something that I use quite a lot. I mean, the chorus is I mean that's kind of obviously it's a lot more subtle sort of thing, you know, but it's. Again, it all depends on the artist, but I mean, probably the chorus is something that I could use more because that's something you could have on a lot of the time without it being too obvious. Whereas, you know, the octave is really full on, which is what you want, you know. But well, with Chris, Jules' brother Chris Holland, I played a lot of his albums as well. So he's a great sort of singer-songwriter. So he's done a lot of stuff, and there was one track I played on his, and he wanted me to come up with an intro. And this is the one thing, if you ever play on an original track and you want to play something a bit flashy, make sure that further down the line you can still play it. You know, never sort of overstretch yourself, because all of a sudden you get called to do a gig. Yeah, can you do that intro you did? And you think, oh, hang on a minute, I'm going to have to spend some time with this, you know. But I think one of the things I did with Chris, and it was like... And it's like that for about 5 minutes.
It's got like a Geddy Lee thing going on, isn't it? Like the beginning of a Rush tune or something, like big proggy. That's almost where the chorus thing kind of comes into its own, isn't it?
I mean, I haven't played that for about 10 years, as you probably noticed. But again, I just thought to myself, you know... I mean, you know, it's kind of cool, you know, but it's just nice to, because it was such a prominent part.
Yeah.
You know, it's just nice if you can. You know, just
a layer,
you know, so that's the MXR bass chorus deluxe. Again, I tend to just set these things and leave them as they are. I don't do a lot of tweaks on them. I'm just trying to find one good core sound, you know. And they've, of course, there's the Phase 95, which I love this. I think it's actually two phase in ones. I think
it is. The Phase 95 is like a doubled up phaser, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You know, so obviously very, very good for things like.
Nice that would not sound right without that phaser.
Oh god, no, not at all. You know, but yeah, it's I love that. I love a good phase pedal. So those are the three main ones, I guess. But you know, I use other MXR ones as well. I've got like an envelope filter. A couple of others, but I guess the one thing I don't use much of is overdrive and distortion. That's the only thing. I just remember I had to play bass with Lemmy once.
Right.
And he came on the show.
Was this on Jules?
No, this is on the Chris Evans Don't Get Toothpaste.
Yeah.
And he wanted to do, I think we did the Ace of Spades and Good Golly Miss Molly. Okay. So I thought to myself, well, okay, you know, I'm not needed here. I'll go and have a cup of tea somewhere. And because we'd run through it, and Lemmy had his Marshall stacks there. And Jules said to me, look, whatever you do, don't leave the stage, because we do need someone to play bass.
Oh, so the whole Lemmy thing's not really, he's missing half the notes, is he, whilst he's singing?
Well, yeah, it was all...
It's just visual.
And don't get me wrong, I loved him to bits, and he and I always got on well, and he was, you know, he's a fantastic guy, but what he was playing was just a distorted, like...
Right.
It was, you couldn't really hear anything, and I just think, you know, I think Jules wanted someone to go... he wanted someone to actually play the part to. If that's the right part, I don't know, but yeah. So he wanted some notes in there.
Isn't it bizarre? In one interview, we've gone from playing the Ace of Spades to Shaka Khan to Luther Vandross. It's just like what a varied career.
Oh yeah, it's a bit mental, and it is kind of and you do have to. Again, you have to keep up with gear and equipment. You have to keep up with current trends, and you have to make sure you've got the right equipment. And you have to do your homework. You have to be able to play a lot of different styles. I mean, not everybody that I work with, like say in Jools' band. I mean, I was a former session player, so so coming into that environment for me was perfect because I'd already done the work. I'd already played every different style of music. Whereas some of the guys at Jools' band were just like one genre, which is absolutely fine. But none of us saw what was coming. Yeah. So, but for me, I embraced it fully because I thought, well, this is what I'm used to doing.
Well, I guess all that's probably left to say, now that we've clearly established for every other bass player out there that you do have the best bass playing gig in the world, any plans to retire soon so that the next guy or girl can have a shot, or do you think you're just going to carry on as long as Jules wants to do it?
I know some people are waiting for me to retire. Cause every time I come out of my hotel room and I get to the top of the stairs, there's a roller skate, like an old-fashioned roller skate on the top, a banana skin waiting to go. But I do have the worst record of absenteeism from the Jules gig purely for medical reasons. I haven't been the luckiest person when it comes to sort of good health. So I've had some heavyweight people. So basically, my dep is Pino Palladino.
Fine.
So Pino and I used to be neighbours. We used to live in Blackheath in southeast London, and we used to live in neighbouring streets. So we always used to hang out. But because him and Jules go way back, and he was Jules' first bass player, so Jules will call him first. And I know Dave Bronze, who's Eric Clapton's bass player, Dave's dep for me. Herbie Flowers dep for me a long time ago. So I like to think that my deps are they're
good quality.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
They'll do a job.
I love what I do so much. And why would you want to stop doing that? And I'm 55 now, so I reckon I've still got a few more years left. And I think the gig will keep going. Jules loves to play. He's not one for resting on his laurels.
Yeah.
He just enjoys working and gigging. I think the TV show is going to be going for at least a couple more years, if not longer. So,
as long as people keep tuning in, I guess, why change it? And it's such a great, I was saying before we started, it's probably now the only mainstream TV program that you can watch, and it is a very eclectic mix of famous artists, emerging artists, world music. I think there's a lot to be said for, fair play to, the Beeb for kind of just carrying on and you're not going to like every band that you see on there, but it is a taste, isn't it, of everything that's out there.
I mean, I think Jules was very keen on getting as many old school iconic artists on there. I know the BBC are very keen to have new people, but I know that Jules himself, and I understand why as well, because not only were those his favourite players, like Aretha Franklin, people like that, he wanted more of that. But because obviously they're a lot of them have gone now. They're no longer with us, but a lot of them were approaching a certain age, and if you don't get them now, that could be the end of that. So we've been lucky to get a lot on there. I think when Smokey Robinson came on, I mean that was pretty amazing. But the strange thing about that was that our guitarist wasn't available, so they just wanted the rhythm section and Smokey, and he was going to come on and he was going to do that song. That Nora Jones had a hit with it. Don't know why. I think it was called.
I'm sure I saw that. Was that a Hootenanny or was that?
No, that was a regular later thing. So
I'm sure I've seen that one. But
so Jules said, "Look, we need a guitarist. We got to get some." He said, "Do you know anyone we can call?" And I thought to myself, "Well, I know loads of guitarists, but if they don't sort of match up to Jules' expectations, and I'm going to get in trouble." So I said, "You pick them. You go and choose one." Sorry for all my guitar player friends out there that I could have got you that gig. I do apologise, but I bottled out. But anyway, so Jules called me up and said, "Look, I've struggled. It's not been easy. I've managed to get Eric Clapton. He'll just have to do. There's any person I could get at short notice." So anyway, normally what happens when you do the TV, and we knew Eric. He's a good friend of ours. We've worked with him loads. So I thought, okay, we're good here. So when we got to the BBC, and normally we always rehearse as a band. Like we get there a couple of hours before the show's recorded, and we rehearse together the song a few times, and then the artist will come and join us. We'll rehearse a couple more times, and then we'll have a break, and then the show will start. So
That's the fans just kicked in there. I tell you what, I'll just switch.
No, that's right. Well, that's well, yeah. I mean, you can do, but the cool thing about this is that there is a low. There's a quiet fan setting on there. I mean, we can turn it off for now, but it'll just be.
You know what? No one will. It won't pick.
No, but that's another key thing. Sorry to jump in stories there, but other amps I've used in the studio when we're doing the chat.
Yeah.
I've had to turn them off, and I said to Jim. So when I first said that, I said, Jim, there is. I said, please tell me there's a quiet fan setting, and there is. So that's the other cool thing about that, which wasn't on my previous gear. Anyway, so yeah, back to the story. So, but we were told that day that we weren't going to rehearse with Smokey Robinson because he was coming in quite late. He wanted to have a couple of hours kip. So the first time we were going to see him was the moment we played him.
Yeah.
Now I wasn't that surprised at it because I've been doing that show for a long time, and I know that it can be chaotic and not always as planned. But Eric Clapton was quite shocked, I have to say. He said to me, he said, this is incredible. He said, does this normally happen? And I said, it's very rare. It's very rare. Because I guess Eric's the kind of person that's used to rehearsing, not just for hours, but for days and weeks and months. And all of a sudden, there is no rehearsal with Smokey Robinson. So I said, welcome to my world. This is what we have to do. So sure enough, we ran through the songs. And of course, he played them beautifully. And we got to spend the day together. We were sitting down and having a great chat. And then eventually the show started. I think one of the band played first, and then we saw Smokey come in, and he just walked to the microphone, sang the song. We played it with him. That was the first time we'd ever seen him or anything like that. And he came over afterwards. He gave Eric and me a big hug, and said, "Hey guys, that was fantastic, beautiful, loved you playing. Thanks for doing that." And then he just went, and that was it. And I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, well, there you go."
Did that just happen?
Yeah, but I think Eric was just so shocked that and I kind of was. It's unusual, but I've realised with Jules and that show, sometimes you just got to go with it. There's no choice. But yeah, for us not to have done that with such an iconic guy and on a live show, because let's face it, there's room for error.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It sounded great, and that clip's out there as well. But I'm sitting there, and you can see me grinning from ear to ear because, I'm playing this beautiful song with this iconic sort of Motown legend with this, guitar legend as well. I'm thinking to myself, this does not get any better.
Does not get. Well, look, I think that's a great story to kind of finish up on. It's been an absolute pleasure having you in. I hope everyone that's watched has learned something and enjoyed the chat and the stories.
I hope so too.
It's I'd love to meet some more of the band. I mean, it sounds like they're obviously a cool bunch. And
we'll come along. I think we play here. Where you are in Guildford. So come along, because again, a lot of people are not able to travel, which is what's great about the TV shows and the radio show. If you want to tune into that, but we'd love to have you along.
Well, it's very kind of you. So thank you so much for coming.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it too. Anyway, please like and subscribe the videos. I'll put links in the description below where you can find out more about Dave and more about the equipment that he's using and stuff. But yes, for now, thank you for watching, and we shall see you next time.